In a flashback, a determined man orders his team not to let their target escape. He knows that if they can defeat the monster, their group will finally ascend to Class A. His focus sharpens as he notices Fra, who is preoccupied with healing an injured child. The man sneers at Fra, criticizing him for wasting his magic on a mere villager and calling him useless. With a cold glare, he demands to know why Fra is squandering his efforts. Fra, unwavering, responds that saving the child was necessary, but the man's eyes show no sympathy. Suddenly, a monstrous creature attacks, catching Fra off guard and leaving him unable to dodge in time. The next thing he knows, he's severely wounded and lying in bed. The man, along with 2 other party members, stands over him with a cold expression. The man bluntly declares that Fra is now useless to them. Stunned, Fra listens as the man blames him for letting their prey escape, mentions his name, and coldly announces that all of Fra's savings now belong to them. To add insult to injury, he strips Fra of his rank, demoting him to F, the lowest tier. They leave him there, tears streaming down his face as the weight of betrayal and abandonment crushes him. Fra awakens drenched in sweat, tears streaming down his face as the haunting memories flood back. He thinks of his mother, reminding himself that he did his best and that he still dreams of becoming the hero he's always aspired to be. Alongside him is a mysterious craftsman who claims to have come from another world. After finishing his work, the craftsman introduces Fra to the concept of a megaphone. He explains how it works, transforming electrical signals into sound, and proudly calls it the Fujimura speaker. The craftsman enthusiastically details the materials and process he used to create it, showcasing his skill and encouraging Fra to give it a try. Takumi instructed Fra to channel a bit of his mana, pull the trigger, and speak into the device. Although hesitant, Fra followed the instructions. To his astonishment, the device produced a thunderous sound like a bolt of lightning, leaving his ears ringing. As Fra slumped to the floor, examining the device in disbelief, Takumi looked on, satisfied with the outcome, and remarked on the endless possibilities of magical stones. He suggested that they could create even more powerful machines in the future. Ignoring Takumi's excitement, Fra questioned why he had been chosen to defeat the Demon King, convinced that Takumi could have achieved that goal much faster on his own and become the hero himself. Takumi casually responded that he had no interest in becoming a hero, comparing it to being a performer burdened with unnecessary complications. He found the idea of a one-handed heroine more intriguing, leaving Fra speechless. Takumi then explained that a craftsman's place is behind the scenes, where the real magic happens, and emphasized the joy of making others happy through their creations. He suggested they head to the city, and after a brief pause, Fra agreed, now with a newfound confidence. Later, in the bustling capital of the Reso Kadoria Kingdom, Takumi marveled at the unfamiliar sights around him. He casually struck up a conversation with a random beastman, making Fra anxious. Fra urged him to avoid drawing attention, but Takumi quipped back that Fra was the one being strange, wrapping himself up despite the sunny weather. Startled, Fra explained that he was hiding his face because he felt embarrassed. Takumi quickly understood and bluntly pointed out Fra's burned scars, showing his typical lack of tact. Fra laughed awkwardly, just as a commotion suddenly broke out behind them. Nearby onlookers watched with excitement, placing bets on who would come out on top. Takumi, intrigued by the lively atmosphere, asked Fra if this was a common occurrence. Fra explained that Reso was usually a quiet provincial town, but things had changed recently with the reappearance of a second dungeon, the Cavern Path Embo, a labyrinth that first appeared 100 years ago. He went on to describe the nature of dungeons, explaining that they are underground lairs with varying terrains and levels, where the risks and rewards from monsters and treasures attract many adventurers. These dungeons often become hubs of logistics, trade, and culture, leading to the growth of towns and cities around them. Fra added that a tournament called Fest would be held tomorrow, where the winner earns the right to challenge this dungeon first. Any treasures they find would be theirs to keep. Excited at the prospect of watching the event, Fra was caught off guard when Takumi suggested they should claim the treasure themselves. Fra started to sweat nervously, exclaiming that it would be impossible with adventurers from all over the country and neighboring lands participating. He pointed out that the tournament allows groups of up to 5 members, while they were only 2, not to mention the presence of formidable Class A teams. Despite this, Takumi remained unfazed, confident in their chances with the Bakufuji weapon in hand. Hearing this, Fra was horrified at the thought of using such a weapon in that setting, shouting that it would turn him into a mass murderer. His outburst drew the attention of the crowd, who recognized him and began whispering about his past. They accused him of being a traitor, hurling hurtful words based on mere rumors. Takumi, standing beside him, patted Fra on the shoulder and advised him to ignore the crowd like a grown-up. However, the crowd soon turned their insults toward Takumi, mocking him and comparing him to a goblin. Confused by the reference, Takumi asked Fra to show him an illustration. As soon as he saw it, he angrily demanded his gun, ready to blast the crowd, completely contradicting his earlier advice. Fra tried to stop him, but was interrupted by a voice he knew all too well. The voice began mocking him, and Fra quickly recognized it as V. Donor, his former party leader, accompanied by the rest of the group. The crowd erupted in cheers at the sight of the famous Class A party, hailing them as one of the favorites to win the fest. As Fra stood in stunned silence, V moved closer, reminiscing about the past. He then mocked Fra for forming a new party with just a kid and admitted to spreading the rumors that ruined Fra's reputation. Fra was shocked, but not entirely surprised as the memories came flooding back. V continued to belittle him, even bringing up his mother, cruelly suggesting that she was still watching him from heaven. Fra clenched his teeth in frustration, but before he could respond, Takumi stepped in. He called V a brat, shocking everyone, and dismissed the ranking system, telling V not to judge people by appearances. Fra was stunned, while the crowd grew furious at Takumi's rudeness, demanding an apology to V unfazed. V approached Takumi, mocking his immaturity and for being associated with a supposed traitor. He then asked if they were there to compete in the tournament, and Takumi immediately confirmed, much to Fra's surprise. V warned Takumi to be careful of accidents, to which Takumi coolly replied that V should do the same. Witnessing the tense exchange, Fra silently screamed in his mind, anxious about what might unfold next. The next day, the massive stadium was filled with cheering spectators. The participants and knights were getting ready for the competition. In the stands, people whispered about Takumi and Fra, recognizing them as the ones who had fought against the Flash Sword Shiden. They mocked Fra for being a mere F-rank healer, and ridiculed Takumi for his strange appearance and the smoke that seemed to billow from his mouth. As the murmurs died down, a knight stepped forward to announce the start of the event. With a booming voice, he declared the beginning of the selection tournament, and the crowd erupted in excitement. Earlier at the shop, Takumi asked Fra about the quickest way to defeat the Demon King. Fra was taken aback by the question, but Takumi insisted on the importance of speed in his work as a craftsman. Fra explained that to enter the Demon King's domain, one must be an SF-rank adventurer. He mentioned that only 7 people in the world, known as Solon, have the ability to freely enter Aduma, the front line. These Solon are considered humanity's greatest hope, nearly revered as heroes. Back in the present, Commander Kiana announced the start of the Faust selection tournament, calling the participants into the arena. As Farah looked around, a man in front of him glared, making him shiver and wonder why he was there. Other participants whispered among themselves, mocking Fra and Takumi. They doubted that an F-rank healer and a kid could be real adventurers and questioned if they were underestimating the fest. Feeling the weight of their words, Fra walked with his head down and accidentally bumped into a burly man clad in armor. He tried to apologize, but when the man turned around, Fra was startled by his intimidating presence. Meanwhile, Takumi casually remarked on the man's size, provoking one of his group members to draw his sword. Seeing this, Fra quickly hid behind Takumi, repeatedly apologizing. Suddenly, a burly man named Ken stepped in to stop his group and crouched down to take a closer look at Fra and Takumi. He asked what the kids were doing there if they were lost, and where their parents were. With a pitying tone, he'd assumed they must be trembling with fear. Annoyed at being treated like a child, Takumi pinched Frye's cheek to keep him from interfering. Then, with a burst of frustration, he introduced himself and Fry, boldly declaring that they would soon defeat the Demon King. Ken and his group were taken aback, while the nearby participants laughed, calling Takumi crazy. But as the burly man locked eyes with Takumi, he suddenly fell silent, noticing the determined look in Takumi's eyes. After a moment, he smirked, complimenting Takumi's spirit and apologizing for treating him like a kid. He then introduced himself as Gandalf, along with his group members, Jin and Ken. As they parted ways, Gandalf suggested they have a fair fight if they meet in the tournament. Takumi watched him walk away, chuckling while Fry quietly noted Gandalf's surprisingly kind demeanor. Meanwhile, atop the city's fortress tower, a guard yawned while on duty. He was lost in thought, considering placing a bet on the selection tournament, with Sheen being a popular choice. His thoughts were abruptly cut off when he noticed something emerging from the forest, followed by a horde of monsters. Realizing the danger, he quickly rang the bell to alert everyone. Hearing the commotion, Takumi wondered aloud what was happening. Frey explained that it might be a mast, a phenomenon where monsters swarm and attack when a new dungeon is formed. As the knights began to gather, Frey reassured Takumi that the royal capital had its royal knights and plenty of adventurers to handle the threat. The guard arrived, panting, and delivered alarming news. More than 1,000 monsters, including goblins and ogres, were closing in on the city and would reach them within 30 minutes. This revelation stunned everyone, drawing comparisons to one of the 5 great dungeons. Meanwhile, Vo suggested that whoever claimed the most war spoils would be declared the festival's champion. He argued that dungeons belonged to adventurers, and defeating the monsters could earn them the title of the nation's heroic saviors. Vo's words ignited a fire within the adventurers, who began gathering, ready to fight. When the Knight Commander heard this, he quickly made a decision. He announced a shift in their mission to a new rank of task, the mass extermination battle. With the backing of the Rasso Kingdom, he urged the adventurers to unleash their full potential in defending the castle. Witnessing the scene unfold, Frey felt overwhelmed as the crowd erupted in enthusiastic cheers, and battle cries echoed as the gates swung open. Sheen's group, led by Vo, was the first to charge at the monsters. They unleashed a barrage of buffs and abilities, decapitating goblins, shocking them with magic, crushing them with brute force, and slicing them in half. Despite their efforts, the fight was far from one-sided. Several adventurers were injured in the fray. As the bloody battle raged on, Takumi pulled a hesitant Frey into the fight. Frey hesitated, feeling unworthy of participating in the selection tournament. Suddenly, he spotted a man on the brink of death lying on the ground. Without a second thought, Frey rushed to his side and healed him using the Baku Fuji. The man awoke, astonished to find his body fully restored, leaving Frey to breathe a sigh of relief while marveling at just how powerful his healing magic was with the weapon. Just then, a goblin launched a surprise attack from behind, but Gandalf stepped in just in time to block it. He quickly ordered Ken and Jin to deal with the goblin, and they swiftly sliced it into pieces. Gandalf asked if Frey was unhurt, and warned him that if he didn't keep his cool, he would lose the tournament. Frey replied that as a healer, he couldn't ignore someone in need, explaining that his late mother would have done the same. Curious, Gandalf asked about her, and Frey described her as a strong and kind-hearted woman who always fought for others, Mars von Freya. Frey then shared his aspiration to become a hero, one who could surpass his mother's dreams. To him, a hero isn't just someone who defeats the Demon King, but someone who serves as a beacon of hope for the weak. Upon hearing this, Gandalf immediately recognized the name Mars von Freya, the first female Solon, known as the Flame Princess, and a legendary healer who perished 15 years ago. He never imagined that a surviving family member would be here in a place like this. Understanding Frey's identity and aspirations, Gandalf assured him that he and his team would protect him so he could focus on healing, emphasizing that it was their duty as veteran warriors to safeguard the younger generation. Suddenly, Gandalf paused, hearing Takumi's laughter as he casually suggested they grab drinks after the battle. Amused, Gandalf agreed and burst into hearty laughter, despite Kin's objections. As the group bantered, Vo appeared, sarcastically commenting on Fra's determination and how much his healing abilities had improved since they last met. He openly admitted to spreading the rumors about Fra being a traitor and expressed his surprise at Fra's resilience. Intrigued, Gandalf asked to hear more about these rumors. Before Gandalf could react, Vo swiftly moved behind him, stabbing through a gap in his armor. Gandalf coughed up blood as Vo twisted the blade, leaving Fra in shock. With a chilling expression, Vo declared that the strong create the stories that fools believe. He sneered, claiming no one would ever believe the tale of an F-rank healer and a kid. Jin and Kin were enraged, but before they could act, they were suddenly struck by a lightning spell from a female mage in Vo's party. Another party member laughed, dismissing it as an easy mistake in the heat of battle. Vo then yanked his sword from Gandalf's body, causing him to collapse to the ground. He declared that being weak is a sin and that the weak should stay silent and listen to the strong. Turning to Tumi, Vo asked if he'd learned anything from what he'd just seen, reminding him of his previous life. Vo swung his sword at Tumi, but Tumi effortlessly blocked it with a wrench, leaving Vo bewildered. Taking a drag from his cigarette, Tumi casually remarked that he's always running into useless scumbags wherever he goes, but this time he's glad to be in a different world. With a confident grin and a fierce glint in his eyes, Tumi announced that from now on, they'll be adopting a Showa-era style where punks get kicked to the curb.